So this is Rolo and the Gunpowder plot, because this little time-travelling Jack Russell was actually there when Guy Fawkes tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament. So this is the beginning of chapter 10 in the third book in the Secret Adventures of Rolo, called The Dragon's Pram. The next morning, the smiley lady finally noticed that I was scratching my ear rather more than usual, and she put her hand down to stroke me and felt a hard lump. After an emergency visit to the vet, thankfully no sign of the kissing cat on the reception desk this time, I had to suffer the embarrassment of being sent home wearing a cardboard cone around my neck to stop me scratching my ear whilst the spot heals. Nothing more than an infected bite, the vet said, although which century I'd been bitten in remained to be seen. That night, Yulia summoned me by the usual means of tapping on the kitchen window, and she could barely suppress her giggles at the sight of me struggling through the trapdoor with the silly cardboard cone around my head. Even Athelstan had to fight to keep his composure as he looked down from his woody perch. I suppose I must look rather ridiculous. I tried to muster my dignity and ignore them. Early 17th century for you, little pup. He tried to keep a straight face as he told me I was off to the Houses of Parliament. Do you want to take young Gwyn with you? That's the baby dragon. He would love a time-travelling adventure. He's too young to fly just yet, but keep him out of mischief. Yulia held out what looked like a small leather bucket on a strap, and I realised it was a kind of saddlebag for the transportation of the dragonling. Rather than Gwyn being strapped to me, I was rather hoping it would be the other way round. I was looking forward to another dragon flight, but of course he was much too small to carry my weight and couldn't use his wings for flight just yet anyway. I set off to find my young scaly charge, and he came to the entrance of the quarry at once when called, hopping over the cave floor. Yulia set her lantern on the ground and held out the pouch, and Gwyn jumped straight in, eager for adventure and burbling Roro, which I assume was supposed to be me. He snuggled down in the bottom of the bag, and Yulia and Dar lifted it carefully between them, tightened the girth strap around the middle. The dragonling was loaded. We were all set. There you can see me in my cone of shame. I dropped the pink ball at the foot of the Athelstan tree, and we went off down the time tunnel. Yulia and Dar led the way, and I could hear sniggering from the woodland animals left behind in the forest. We must have been quite a funny sight, a bit like a pantomime horse. I kept catching the cardboard collar on the sides of the tunnel, as it's quite narrow down there, as you know, and only wide enough to fit a slim Jack Russell, not the silly collar. It's just as well Gwyn can't breathe fire yet, or he'd ignite your collar, laughed Yulia. Eventually we came out in some kind of storeroom, and I wondered if we were in the right place. No sound from the bag, so I assumed Gwyn, the baby dragon, was sleeping. Looking around, I could just about make out sacks of something, bundles of firewood and heaps of coal. It felt chilly, not summer, that's for sure. "Avast, what creature are you?" boomed a voice from the shadows. I couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was coming from, but with my sense of hearing sharpened in the gloom, I thought I could detect a note of merriment. The pesky collar, I'd almost forgotten I was wearing it. I edged forward cautiously, unsure of whom I was addressing, and in front of me stepped a short man in a large floppy hat which almost covered his face, and he was completely wrapped in a large cloak. There was a certain aroma about him, and I would say he'd been in this underground place without a wash for a good few days at least. I could see his breath as he spoke. It was cold in there. "Egad, what is that around your neck?" inquired the man. "It's the latest fashion where I come from," I said sarcastically. "It's called a ruff." Now, I should point out I didn't actually say it was called a ruff. I merely turned in the direction of a scurrying sound I heard coming from the sacks and gave a little warning bark, which probably sounded like ruff. Right on cue, Gwyn woke up and poked his little dragon head out from the leather bag. All talk of fashionable collars was completely forgotten. The man jumped back in surprise, and then his eyes narrowed, glinting in the dark as he saw the dragon. "Ah, good, you will come in very useful and no mistake," he said. "What are you doing down here anyway?" I asked, when the man reassured me that our only other companions were mice and rats. "I'm going to blow up the Houses of Parliament and everyone in it, especially the king," said the man, quite matter-of-factly, as if it was a ridiculous question to be asking. I'd no idea what I got myself into. He had seemed at first to be a regular kind of guy. The man patted the sack of corn next to him, and I jumped up and settled down, keen to hear his story. Gwyn went back to sleep in his pouch. And I'm going to leave it there. I'll just show you the photograph that accompanies this part of the chapter, and I will resume very shortly.